chance you can do something amazing to feel your passion blazing and shine.
Paint with every vision, dance in new directions, explode to new heights in your mind.
I will rise up with you today.
Lift up my voice
and boldly say, we are the ones we've been waiting for.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to AGNT Speaks. We are here with you live. We are a little behind schedule today. We were having some tech issues, but we are here, and we are so glad to be hosting you for this conscious conversation today. I am Reverend Erin, and I come to you live from Unity Village. I serve as the spiritual leader for Unity Village Chapel Spiritual Community on grounds at Unity headquarters. And I am part of the AGNT Council. So we are here as your new thought representatives, holding a space for a world that works for all and holding a space for a world that aligns our principles with our action, creating that world consciously, that we go beyond doing the internal work of benefiting our own lives, and we express that life and express that goodness out to the world and into our systems. So I am delighted to join you here today and host you for a conscious conversation with one of my beloved colleagues and amazing friends, a man of light, a man of heart, a man of incredible consciousness and creativity. His name is the Reverend David Goldberg, and he is a minister in the Centers for Spiritual Living, and he is coming to us today to share a message. So David, what do you have for us today?
Well, Reverend Erin, good morning, and hello to all the beloveds that are joining us. You know, Erin, in this time, of course, particularly in the US, with this being the month of July, I've been reflecting on freedom. I've been reflecting on what does that mean? How can I serve? How can I step up and step in, as well as encourage my community to do the same? So, you know, what I came up with, and it was rather serendipitous, a new exhibit by Norman Rockwell opened at the Denver Art Museum. And it is Rockwell on freedom. And specifically, President Franklin Roosevelt in 1941, in his State of the Union talk, put forth 4 freedoms that he was really encouraging the American people to step into. And that was freedom from fear, freedom from want, freedom of religion, and freedom of speech. And as I was looking at that, all of those just struck me that we're dealing with so many similar constructs, if you will. Our issues might be the same, our issues might be slightly different, and yet we are working through, we're seeing the scratchiness, we're seeing the good and the shadow of all of those freedoms come to fruition. And it, you know, my humble opinion, my posit is, as those on a spiritual journey, as metaphysicians, it's up to us to move those conversations forward. Because one of my guiding principles, Erin, is the opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love is just simply not being engaged or lethargy. So I'm thinking about freedom this July.
I love that. I love that. I was just actually thinking about this somehow on my kayaking trip this morning. It came to my mind about the conversations that are going on today around fear. And so you said that one of the freedoms was freedom from fear. And, you know, I've just been present to the conversation and noticing that there is a lot of kind of name calling out there around fear and around what it is. And people are looking at what they see, and then they are judging to see if to them that's fear, which is interesting because fear is an internal experience. So I don't think that you can measure fear or even know if someone's in fear from looking at them from the outside. I think you have to dive into their consciousness and into their mind to see what they are coming from. But it was just an interesting contemplation to have, in looking at that, because there's so much going on, oh, you're getting out there because of fear. You're not getting out there because of fear. You're wearing a mask because of fear. You're not wearing a mask because of fear. All of these conversations. And, so what is the difference between fear and faith? What really is fear? Am I fearful because I wear a mask? Am I fearful because I put on sunscreen and a hat if I go in front of the sun? Am I fearful if I put on my seatbelt? Am I fearful if I do a lot of practices that I know engage in high self-care? Is that fear? You can see on an animal fear. I have a little backyard chickens, and one of the days I let them out, and a bird flew over and made a sound, and I didn't know anything of it. I wasn't afraid, but all of a sudden my little chick ran into the bushes and squatted down and froze, right? And I thought, wow, that's great. And so yes, that's a fear response. You could see it, but it's also a wisdom response, right?
Yes.
Because it knew exactly what to do. It went to the bushes, it held still, it protected itself. So it's a good conversation to have, because I think sometimes we want to assume we know why people do things and what they're feeling. And can people take conscious action that's not based on fear, but that to someone else, if they were doing it, it would be because they were terrified or they're afraid or whatever it is?
Yes. No, absolutely. And a couple of acronyms that many have heard before, but continue to inform my work, is we have a couple of choices around fear. The first one being forget everything and run. We can just drop it, and it's the fight or flight, and we can choose flight and moving on to whatever is next, right? And then the second one that resonates with me is false evidence appearing real. So when I spend my time in that place of worry, when I spend my time in that place of trajectory, well, this could happen, well, this could happen, well, yes, and most of the time it doesn't. And when I find myself in fear, I really try to check and to reground and reconnect, because when I'm in that place, I'm praying for what I don't want. I'm giving my time and my energy and attention to the bad, to the shadow, to the worst, to whatever. And what do we know? Whatever gets our attention creates our intention. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I also heard something that resonated with me, is that, the creator, in whatever form I choose to recognize him or her or it, endowed me with a brain that I get to co-create. So if I know at the core of my being, and you being more fair than I, but if I know at the core of my being that wearing sunscreen and wearing a hat is a move of self-care, is me taking care of this biodegradable flesh suit, that's not fear. That is using the intellect and the capability and the ability that the one power, the one presence has given me, and I get to do what I want with that, and I choose to use it to protect myself, how I know how to do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that goes into that creative process, that life and God doesn't just happen to us, it happens in and through and as us. And so the more we develop that ability, the more we consciously step into that co-creation. I was listening to NPR on my way to kayaking this morning, and there was a conversation about foresight, and how it was about the environment, but it was about how human beings are one of the creatures that we know of that have foresight. And they didn't say that. I say one of the ones. They said we're the one. I would say there's probably some others that have some foresight. And you and I are on the same plane with the creatures of the earth. But it was an interesting conversation, because it said, foresight helps us to learn from our past and seize the opportunities of the future, because we can use that wisdom. And I think that's part of that practice. That's part of the practice of stepping out of fear. When we use foresight and when we use insight, we don't have to be in fear to take conscious action and to take wise action. It doesn't have to come from a place of, like you said, I'm praying in something. I'm not necessarily worrying about something. I'm not, I'm not in fear or in a state of contraction around something. I am taking mindful action. You know, one of the funny things about what's going on in our world right now, and well, maybe I'm going to keep this for the Zoom room. I'm going to keep this next piece for the Zoom room. So if you want to come up close and personal and hop in the Zoom room with David and I, we will meet you right in there. We have a line of people that are already up and ready in that room. We come to you live every Wednesday for AGNT Speaks. We have a wonderful program ready for next week, so I hope you're here. If you want to learn more about AGNT, go ahead and you can follow some of the links on the event. So you'll see the event link on Facebook. You can find more about our leaders. You can find out where they're serving spiritual centers that are near you and spiritual centers that are online right now. And if you have a spiritual practice of giving to where you see conscious conversations and nourishment happening, you can go ahead and click in that donate button and support the work of AGNT, led by the Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith and these amazing colleagues in the field that we have. So thank you for being with us at AGNT Live Speaks, and we will hop into the Zoom room. We'll see you soon.
So you see, when we gain new information, we have the ability to shift and to change and to grow and to move. We don't have to, but we certainly can. So what does that look like then? What is the responsibility that comes with freedom to speak or freedom of speech? Well, for freedom of speech to work, we all have the responsibility to listen. So what is a minister without a congregation to listen? What is a court of law without a jury of one's peers to hear the evidence, the pro and the con, and to interpret and see what they can find as part of our judicial system and our jury system? And what are elected officials if they are not in constant communication with those who elect them to office and those who pay their salaries through our tax dollars? So you see, yes, we absolutely have freedom of speech, and we have a responsibility to listen. You know, I love a quote from a French politician who said, "Where are the people? I must follow them, for I am their leader." So leaders are not always out ahead of the parade. Sometimes leaders are in the midst of it all, in the mix. Sometimes leaders are behind. Sometimes leaders take a pause. So wherever you are on your journey, I invite you into the spiritual practice of listening.
All right, everyone, hello. We are offline and into the Zoom room. So thanks for being here with us today. And David, thank you for a lively conversation. That was fun getting to go back and forth with you. We have a beautiful, beautiful group of people in the Zoom room. So hello, everyone. What would you like to talk about today? The thing that I was going to start to share, and remember, you have a Q&A button up at the top so you can post your question, and you have the chat room if you want to start chatting back and forth. I'm just checking in here. Okay, so I'll give you just a little thing. The thing that I was going to say is that right now, this COVID experience, right? This thing, it's like it's kind of like an STD, and I think it's better to put this in the Zoom room than live online. But it's like this this thing where you have conversations with people. Well, what are you doing to protect yourself? What am I doing to protect myself? Are those things in alignment? And does that mean we want to do this dance? Do we want to interact? Because whatever your level of self-care is, whatever my level of self-care is, you know, if we're going to interact, it's good to know that they're, you know, simpatico. But on the same note, like, this conversation around what do we do and are you being fear-based? You know, if I don't want to get pregnant and I decide to use protection, I don't think that's being fear-based. I think that's being consciousness. If I don't want to get an STD, if someone wants, you know what I mean? Like these are common things, but we've got all of these interesting conversations. And I think most of it is because people are stepping out of their own experience and expressing why I do something for me and allowing ourselves to honor that without having to say, I don't like you for doing what you're doing. If I was doing what you were doing, I'd be in fear. You know what I mean? Like that's probably what's going on in the mind, thinking if I was taking the action you're taking, it would be because I'm afraid. But consciousness is an internal experience. So it's good instead, I think, to turn the table and ask questions. Ask, what does that mean to you? Why do you do that? Tell me more about that. And I think that can be a tool that will help us kind of defragment some of the difficulty that we're adding on to an already difficult time, so that we don't overcomplicate and over kind of traumatize an already difficult time if we can step out of that judgment and into curiosity and question.
Mhm.
Lynn from Oregon, I was given a chance. Okay, how do we get legislation? So David, how do we get legislation for a new WPA heart and soul community services with good basic guaranteed income with single payer healthcare and tiny home apartments or apartments for all too? So this is interesting. This is Lynn from Oregon. I was given an Oregon Change Agent certificate from 3-time Oregon governor for my work with job creation in 2011. How do we get legislation for new WPA heart and soul communities?
Wow, that feels big. That feels good. That feels important. And I'm thinking, you know, both directions, Lynn. I think as your good work has already proven, everything starts at the grassroots. So we know that we are well beyond starting. I think that is evolving into model legislation, perhaps. What is something that you would recommend? Do you recommend taking all of that in one major piece of legislation? Or is it wiser to take it piece by piece? I don't know. That's not my particular area of expertise. I would lean into you and some of your colleagues and friends that you've made. I would also suggest, you know, years ago for the magazine, long before her presidential run, I sat with Marianne Williamson for a couple of hours and interviewed her for a little magazine I used to work for. And we talked, you know, this was prior to the last election. And I know that she was already putting forth her ideas for a Department of Peace. And I said, what does that look like? What will that look like in a Republican administration? And what will that look like in a Democratic administration? And I would encourage you, as you're engaging in this work, to look at those different perspectives. How might you work with the Republican administration at the federal level, as well as with the Democratic legislation? And as we know from being in spiritual community, we're all pretty clear about our differences for any number of reasons. Those continue to be reinforced. And I invite you to bring what you know as a spiritual leader in this process. What are the points of intersection? Excuse me. How can you help your members of Congress reach across the aisle? What is something that touches the heart of somebody from the other party? So, you know, again, as I shared earlier, the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy. So continue to stay engaged, to continue to build coalitions. Please share your ideas, your thoughts with AGNT as we have a national and building an international consortium, if you will. So keep us engaged. Let us know of your progress.